Hello and welcome to another episode of The Wannabe Entrepreneur, the podcast about what's really like to bootstrap a company. Today I have another interview. I have with me Tim Stoddart. Oh, I actually did the pause to say your last name.
You did it properly though. Yeah, you said it properly. You just gotta flow with it. Stoddart.
All right. Yeah. Welcome to the show, Tim. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed your conversation with Kevon. He's a cool kid, and once I heard that, I was really happy to reach out to you. So I'm glad to have a conversation, man. Thanks for having me.
No, it's my pleasure. Did you meet Kevon before?
Well, virtually. He did a presentation for Copyblogger Academy, but he and I also chatted a lot because, well, I always reach out to people that I see that are, working hard and being authentic and just trying to do their own thing. So he and I chatted on Twitter for a little bit, and I would consider him a friend, like most of my friends these days that live on other sides of the world.
Yeah, our Twitter friends, right?
For sure.
I have many of those as well. And and we also met on Twitter. And I did a quick research on you before inviting you also to the podcast, and I found your journey quite interesting, right? So you struggled with addiction for a while, and you were able to recover, and then you built a product called SoberNation that helps other people going through the same issues, and I found it super interesting because to be an entrepreneur, I think the best way is to solve a problem, right? And they are kind of different kinds of problems. There's the problems that are more serious than others in terms of health, and I found it super cool that you're able to not only overcome that, but then also creating a product that's helping other people. And besides that, you have many other cool products. You have your own internet marketing agency. You have also your podcast. So super cool, and I'm excited to learn more about that and to get things rolling. I would love to ask you to introduce yourself and give some of your background here for the Wannabe Entrepreneur listeners.
Yeah, I'd love to. And that was a nice introduction. I appreciate that. It made me feel good. It's always good to see when your hard work is recognized by your peers. So yeah, like I said, my name is Tim Stoddart. I was born and raised in Philadelphia. I grew up to like a blue collar family. My father, he was a luggage handler at airports. So he was the guys that put the suitcases at the bottom of the planes. And my mom was like an inner city ER nurse. She worked as an ER nurse for all my life. I grew up skateboarding. I hated school. I always kind of did my own thing, which presented entrepreneurship in a good light for me. A lot of people see what I do and they think I'm really tech savvy, and I'm not actually. I love the internet, but I love the internet mostly because I'm a writer. I think if I had to say, if somebody asked me like, hey, Tim, like, what are you? What's your profession? Obviously like I'm an entrepreneur, but ultimately at my foundation, I'm a writer. And everything I have, everything I've built, a lot of like what I've learned about myself is a byproduct of me just writing obsessively for years and years and years. I get that from my mom. My mom was a writer. She was much more of like a poet though. My mom was she just loved poetry, and I saw my mom carrying notebooks around with her and writing these quick little poems. And when I was little, I just thought that was really cool. So I just like copied my mom. I still to this day bring a notebook around with me everywhere I go, and I journal as much as I can. My journal
so
kind of,
cool.
Yeah, it's always been very like therapeutic for me, and my journal eventually turns into ideas, and ideas turn into articles, and articles turn into attention, I suppose, and attention leverages itself into like a thriving business. So, obviously that's just like a 4-minute version of how I got to where I am, but I think that's the straightest path I could say.
Mm-hmm. You said that you hated school. Why is that?
I hated sitting still. I mean, school really felt like a prison to me. And I know that
Okay.
sounds so dramatic, but I don't know. Like, there's a lot of people when they get older, they say, "Oh, I wish I could just go back to being a kid." Like, you couldn't. You, I'm allowed to curse on this show, by the way. Sometimes I curse. Okay,
Of course,
I was
no
like,
worries.
you couldn't fucking pay me to go back to school.
Yeah.
I hated it. I always felt like I was gonna burst out of my skin. It felt very inefficient to me.
Hmm.
As I got older and I started really studying what our education system is and like how it became the way it is, it started to make sense because our modern education system is basically a factory line. Like, school was made to create workers, basically. I mean, if you think about it, that's the whole reason why there's a bell in between classes. It's just a factory bell that lets you know that your shift is over.
Right. Never thought of that in that way.
Yeah, it's a Prussian system, really. And it made me want to explode. There were so many things that I would rather be doing. I wanted to be skating. I wanted to be playing sports. I had too much pent up energy. And I also just had a ton of awkwardness. Like, I was just a weird kid. I still am kind of weird, even in social situations like this. I always find myself like, you know, uh, thinking like, oh, I shouldn't have said that, or like, oh man, that came
Hmm.
across the wrong way, or being insecure
Yeah.
about that. And so it was just a real like insecure, angsty time for me. And the whole entire every second I spent sitting in a classroom, I honestly felt like, get me out of here.
Yeah.
And,
And somehow you compared it with prison. Obviously, it's not the same, but somehow it's kind of mandatory, right? So at least until a certain year, right? You have to go to school. There's no other option most of the time. So you are not constrained in terms of physical space, but it's somehow mandatory. And then in that sense, I kind of understand that it can't feel like a prison, right? Because you want to do other stuff, but you just can't.
That's exactly right. There were so many things that I would want to do. Like, it wasn't just like I want to get out of here and do what I want. Like, I'm a very curious person. I love learning. I love reading. I love adventuring and like traveling and just figuring shit out. And the method of which modern education presents that self did not suit me well at all.
Yeah.
And I don't think I'm alone with that. It's like,
No, I'm the same, I think.
yeah.
Well, maybe not to that extreme, but I never particularly loved school. I liked maybe being with friends and doing sports, but just sitting down and learning stuff that I just didn't understand why I had to learn them. That felt really wrong to me, for sure.
Me too. Yeah, me too.
Do you have any ideas on how we can improve the school system and bring it more towards this new era?
A lot of ideas, and I go back and forth a lot in my head about this of how practical they are, because what does school teach you? It teaches you to not make a ruckus. It teaches you to basically just blend in and be not submissive. What's the word? Like, just do what you're told. Basically,
Right.
It teaches you to take tests. It teaches you that there's a grade that you need to achieve. It teaches you to work as an individual, and like, none of those things present themselves in actual success in the real world. Like, to succeed in the real world, you need to work within a group. To succeed in the real world, like, you do not think in terms of getting an A or a B or a C. You think in terms of like, what's the next thing I need to do to continuously make progress. And so there's a couple of things. Like, I think from an intellectual standpoint, it doesn't make any fucking sense that you don't learn about taxes or money management until you get out of school. Even till this day, it seems
I've
like
never
such an
learned it,
obvious
yeah.
one. Yeah, like, how are we still not doing it that way? Where like, at least in America, most college kids like leave high school and then they take on like $100,000 worth of school debt, and they don't even understand how that affects them.
That's true. No, that's I totally agree with that. But you just mentioned as well that school was intended to train factory workers, right?
Yeah.
And in that sense, it makes sense, right? I mean, you're just teaching them to fall in line, not to make a lot of questions, and and it worked, right? You're building people that then will work for the big factories. But things changed, right? Now it's very, very much different. The jobs are, most of the jobs are more mental, and not so much physical, right?
Yes, and I wouldn't quite classify it as a line in the sand between mental and physical. I would classify it as just problem solving. Like school teaches you how to fit spec. School teaches you how to do this exact thing in this exact way. And the real world just isn't like that at all. Like, so most of my life when I was growing up, I was a carpenter. I built houses. And
Cool.
like, yes, there's education you need to build houses. Like you need to know specific skills. You need to know like basic geometry and physics. You need to know what a plumb bob is. But most of the art of getting a house up is like continuously being able to look back at a situation and say like, like how do I do this?
Right.
Because there's intangibles that you didn't see coming. And I think the same is, well, it's not that I think, the same is absolutely true in life. And so like in school, I always felt like, okay, I'm never going to need to know what the parabolic arc of a tennis ball is if I throw it off of a roof that's 10 feet high onto another roof that's like 4 foot below that. But I will need to know how to file my taxes, right?
No, I definitely agree with that. And the only thing that gets me thinking is there are a lot of information that that I didn't want to learn, but then I end up learning because I was kind of forced. And now I like having this information in me because it also opens possibilities, right? When you learn about physics, when you learn about maybe poets or stuff that maybe you're not very much into it at that time, but now you think, okay, it's cool that I know that this existed. I know about history, for instance, which is something that by myself I'll probably never read about. And the fact that I was forced to learn about the history of my country and the world, it's really important for me now also as an entrepreneur to open my horizons, right? And in that sense, I think that you have to be also somehow forced to learn. What do you think about that?
For sure. We need to learn how to learn better. When we leave school, we associate learning with like cramming information into our heads so that we can then recite that information at a specific point in time. Whereas learning is about broader concepts that teach you how to problem solve, as opposed to like, so there's a Neil deGrasse Tyson quote that I think was really interesting once, where he was talking about teaching people how to learn. And he said that he was theorizing two different employees, and he asked here's the scenario. There's a boss behind a desk and there's somebody that's coming in for a job. And the boss asked these two employees, like, how high is that tower behind me? And one of the employees knew the exact answer because he memorized it. And the other employee said, like, I don't know, but give me a second. And he was able to get an estimate of like how, about what time of day it was. Right. And look at the shadow and being able to measure the shadow to get like an approximation of how tall the building was. So like, which of those employees would you want? Would you want the one that like knew the perfect answer because he was able to memorize it? Or would you want the one that was able to like step back and take a look at his surroundings and like figure it out? And I always remember that quote because it just related it like answered this weird question to me that I always had about school, that I couldn't quite figure out what it was that I was actually bothered by. And it was that, right? It was like I left school without actually feeling like I had these problem solving skills that I could apply to the real world.
Yeah, definitely. No, makes total sense. And I felt that the most actually in college. I really hated college because it was mostly bad teachers that are forced to give classes, and at least in Portugal it's like this, and then you're forced to learn a bunch of things that you don't actually learn. Like I end up just studying whatever I need to pass my classes. So yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it's much better to have someone that's able to solve a problem, any problem, than someone that's basically remembers the solution of one problem but doesn't really understand it. So I think that's a
right.
very good point. Yeah,
that's right.
So Was that the relationship with school that kind of somehow took you in a darker path with addiction?
Well, yes and no. Like school didn't help, but ultimately it was just a feeling of being an outsider, of not belonging, of not being secure with myself. Like addiction is a touchy subject, right? Because nobody actually knows what it is.
Yeah.
And I have theories just out of my own experience, and I've written a lot about it if anybody wants to read it. So the reason why I say that is because I don't know exactly why I fell into such a dark downward spiral. Like there's other people that have existed that had very similar experiences as I did, that had like really awful stuff happen to them, and they used it and went in a different direction, right? So I'm not sure why. What I do know is that after it's all said and done, it was actually that really, really dark time in my life that turned into like the best thing that ever happened to me. So
Right.
it's funny to hear this and even sometimes say it, but I'm so grateful for that experience, because it really was like the catalyst for me to follow my dreams, I guess, and do what I wanted to do with my life.
Would you be able to reach the point where you are now without going through that tougher path?
Well, I'd like to think that I would have been able to, like, quote unquote, achieve the same things, but I don't think I would have had the perspective on life, which in a lot of ways makes it worth achieving these things. Because I know a lot of people, especially when I lived in Florida. I live in Nashville now, but when I lived in Florida is like a very wealthy, there's a lot of successful business people in South Florida. And I was surrounded a lot by a lot of very, very successful people that were not happy. And, you know, I don't even like that word, because I think happiness is kind of a myth. You know, like you hear people say, like, I just want to be happy, but that's not actually true, because happiness is just a feeling. It's not actual, like, it's not like a state.
Yeah.
And so I would say content. I was around a lot of people that had a lot of success and were very, very discontent in their lives. And so I think, like, in another world, would I have been able to achieve, quote unquote, these same things? Like, I don't know, maybe. If I had the same circumstances, I'd like to think that I would be successful in, you know, like 9 out of 10 alternate realities, right? But I don't think I'd have had the same perspective that actually makes it worth it for me.
Yeah. Maybe you'd be solving other problems that are not addiction related, right?
Yeah, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah, never knows. So I was kind of hearing in one of your other interviews the story on how you decided to do something to change and try to basically go to rehab. And do you want to share a little bit of that story? Because I think it might make sense to understand then how SoberNation came to be.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Well, so there's kind of two parts of this story. The first part is what actually led me to realizing that, like, I had a huge problem, and more or less my mom had a brain tumor and she was gonna die. Really, the chances of her surviving a surgery were very, very low, and she survived. And there was a moment there when my mother, I was in California. There was only like a couple surgeons who were even able to take on my mom's case. She had a brain tumor right on her brainstem, which, you know, is difficult to remove because brain stems are pretty important. And I mean, it's a bit of a long story, but the long and short of it is that there was a moment when my mother asked me for help. She was in a wheelchair, and I'll never forget it. She asked if I would go with her to a pre-op appointment with the surgeon. And I think the surgeon was just gonna, the way I imagined it, at least, was, you know, I had like a model brain in his hand and was gonna like show where he was gonna cut my mom's head open and like what was gonna happen. And my mom asked if I would
very scary
yeah,
stuff.
it was gnarly. And my mom just came in and she asked if I would go with her because she was scared. And, you know, at the time I was like withdrawing very, very bad. And so it's if you've never experienced it, being dope sick is like very hard to explain. Like your bones quite literally ache. And
Okay.
I was just very sick, like I was very, very sick. I was throwing up on the flight there.
Because
And
you were trying to stop, or just because you didn't consume for a long time?
yeah, just because like I didn't, I was going through the airport, when I was scared.
Right.
So like I hid all my drugs in my suitcase and then like put the suitcase underneath the plane,
Right.
And I'm from Philadelphia, so it was a
Mhm.
long flight. It was from Philly to Phoenix, and then from Phoenix to California, and then I had to get picked up from the airport and the drive. So all in all, it's probably 7 hours worth of traveling, and it's like right about the time where you start getting sick.
Right.
And so yeah, like my mom asked if I would come with her, and I said that I wouldn't. I was like, hey mom, I'm really tired, and granted, like her surgery was the next day, and she was probably gonna die. And I didn't, just because like I needed to kind of do my thing. I needed to just get high or whatever. And it was just a moment I'll never forget, where I crushed some pills up on a desk in front of me and like snorted them. I don't know how graphic you want me to get. And I remember just feeling like that ease and comfort that happens. And then also looking out this window in Northern California, like this beautiful field is like at Stanford University somewhere, and just feeling like, man, I cannot believe that like this is what I had become. And so that was like my real like moment of clarity, I suppose you can call it, where I just saw that this was not sustainable and like this is not who I wanted to be.
You kind of realized that drugs were becoming somehow more important for you than, such a crucial part of your mother's life and your own life and your family's life, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah, and also keep in mind that my mother had me, well, both my parents, but my mom even more so. They had me when they were really young, and so like I'm 35 and I just had a son, and my mom.
Right.
Yeah, thank you. It's a blast. He's super fucking cool. And my mom, like, she was 17, I think, and so I realize now how much both my parents sacrificed to like raise my sister and I well. Like we were lower middle class. We didn't have a whole lot. Money was always a problem for us, but man, like we had dinner every single night. We ate as a family. We read books together. Like my dad always showed up to my soccer games, and so it was just knowing at that moment what I had become was just a big realization, considering how much like my mom meant to me and how much she did for me. And like I couldn't even be there for her, it hit me really hard.
Yeah. And it's something that really strikes a nerve there. And I'm glad you kind of realized and made you change. And also I'm glad that your mom was able to survive that operation. So super, super good. Walk me through then the next steps on that recovery, and then how the idea of creating SoberNation came to be.
Amazing. Sure. Well, again, like long story short, I had a cousin who lived in South Florida, and he was also in recovery, and so he just took me in, and that's how I got to South Florida.
Okay.
He really helped me so much. Like, man, I love that guy so much. He's like, I owe him the world. And I mean, look, here's what happened. I had a mentor basically, and he bought me as a gift a subscription to Success Magazine. And it's so funny to say because this was only 12 years ago, but every issue of Success Magazine came with a CD. And every CD was like an interview of like a successful person. Now it's just podcasts, right? It was very similar to this, but I'd get my issue of Success Magazine, and like you got to understand at this point, like I was 6 months sober, like I put on some weight, I was starting to see like the good in life again, and like gaining a little bit of confidence, like I can do something with my life. And so I'm reading. I was in a place where like I was like willing to absorb this good, positive kind of information, right? Like I was really enjoying it.
Mhm.
And so the CD I listened to was the first one ever. It was an interview with this guy named Seth Godin.
Oh yeah, the marketing guy.
Exactly. And I never knew who Seth Godin was at the time. And this interview just really, really spoke to me. And this was a time, I think, very shortly after he released his book called Purple Cow, which is a very, very important book in the world of like marketing in the digital age. And I don't remember what the interview said, but I do remember, at the end of every interview, there's always like, what would you say to the person just getting started? Like, what's the piece of advice? And he said, start a blog, don't tell anybody about it, and write in it every day. And there's just something about hearing that. Like, it was a huge, huge impactful moment in my life where I just thought to myself, like, you know what? I can do that. And so I pulled up my like piece of shit computer that I bought at a pawn shop. And I went onto Google and I found this thing called Blogspot, which doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
It was
I used it too. Yeah.
That was like the good old days. And I started a blog and I didn't tell anybody about it. And I wrote in it every day. And
which was something that you kind of were already doing before, right? You picked up from your mom, always bringing your notebook along, right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. And I think that's probably why it was so comforting to hear that, because I just thought to myself, I can definitely write every day. Like, this is already what I do. I would write random stuff, really. It became just a way for me to stay out of my head. I would write about my journey and sobriety, and I would write about like how I was feeling. I would write about how weird it was to be living in Florida when I grew up in Philly. And like a couple months later, I randomly discovered that people were reading my blog. And I thought to myself, like, how the hell is this even possible? I didn't tell anybody about it. I didn't tell anyone for months. Like, I did exactly what Seth Godin told me to do. And lo and behold, there's this thing called search engines. And like, people find writing by searching for it. And I realized that, damn, I'm not the only one who's thinking these things. And there's other people who are like scared about what they're going to do at their sister's wedding 10 years from now when they can't have a drink. And like, it was a tradition in my family. My family's Scottish, where they all have like thick Scottish accents. And we had a tradition every Thanksgiving where we would take a shot of scotch. It's a Scottish scotch called McCullum. Yeah. And then we would say like what we were thankful for. It's like, man, I can't do that anymore, and I would write blog. I wrote a blog about it, and it was just this huge realization for me that like, wow, search engines are different. Like, search engines are a way for people to come to me, and I discovered this thing called SEO, and one thing led to another, and I eventually turned that blog. It was called The Fourth Dimension, into SoberNation, and I built a big community, really, of people that were in the same position that I was in, of family members that were trying to find help for their loved ones, of people that like were thinking, hey, do I have a problem? Do I not have a problem? Right. And I just, man, like, all I did was I kept on writing, and it turned into what it turned into. And I'm so grateful for it.
So did you know anything about what SEO was, search engines? Did you do any research about that?
No, I knew nothing. But yes, I did started doing some research, and I suppose this is 10 years down the line, but that is how I discovered Copyblogger. Because as I was building SoberNation, like, I had no idea what I was doing, right? I was just writing. But there was this website called Copyblogger that would publish these amazing articles, and even eventually these really amazing podcasts that taught people like how to write for the internet, how to create articles that people want to read, and how to format articles in a way that makes it so that they can easily digest their information, and how to write great headlines so people click on your article in the first place.
Okay.
And so Copyblogger was my education. Like, the founder of Copyblogger, Brian Clark, it's just so amazing how it all comes full circle. He was actually like a protege of Seth Godin. And so I discovered Brian Clark. I was like, oh my God, he's like an apprentice, I guess is a word, like not literally an apprentice, but very much was like took Seth Godin's methodology and applied it to build Copyblogger. And so I was like, there's this little family, right? There's like this hierarchy of these great writers that are teaching me how to build something. And so SoberNation just kept growing, and it kept growing, and it kept growing. And eventually I got more confident, and eventually I got more confident as like not just a writer that could write great stories, but a writer that could be a good technician in terms of like creating content that the internet wants to read and wants to share.
So SoberNation was a blog, right? You're building an audience. When you realized that this could maybe become something, you said that you just kept on writing. But when was the point when you said, okay, let's make a business out of this? Maybe I can make money out of this. When was this the turning point there?
Well, you know, all the podcasts I've done, no one's ever actually asked me that question before. And the answer is pretty funny because, believe it or not, SoberNation's been like a terrible business. So like it's very lean, right? Because I don't have like a whole lot of employees. And it's really only the last 2 years or so that I figured out the model to make it like a profitable website. But what SoberNation really did is here's the exact moment. I'll tell you the story. There's a website called Moz that used to be run by this dude named Rand Fishkin, who is really a pioneer in SEO. And the Moz blog is something that I would also read every day. So if Copyblogger is a website that sort of teaches you like how to write and how to tell stories and write great copy, I think Moz is probably where I learned a lot more of like how to be technical with my content so that I can get traffic from search. It like taught me how to be an SEO, basically. Copyblogger taught me how to be a writer, and Moz taught me how to be an SEO. And I read this article by this guy named Dave something. He still owns a company called Nifty Marketing. So Dave, the guy who wrote the article, is telling a story about how he was talking to his mentor, and he was telling his mentor about how he was going to build a marketing agency. And his mentor said back to him, there's like 30,000, some astronomical number, 30,000 marketing agencies in the country. Like, why is anybody going to pick you over anybody else? And Dave at the time had a white light moment where he realized that he needed to differentiate himself by being very specific. And so he went specific into being a local marketing agency. And so I read that. And at the time, through SoberNation, what actually happened is treatment centers were reaching out to me like, wow, how did you build this community of people that need help? Because obviously, like, you know, a treatment center would find value in that because they're there to serve the people that are looking for help. And all those people were coming to me instead of going to the treatment center. And so I started freelance writing for treatment centers and just trying to apply some of my skills. And it was at that exact moment when I read that article by Dave something, I can't remember his last name, but Nifty Marketing, NIFTY marketing.com, and you'll find him. And I just realized, wow, there's a huge opportunity for me to build a marketing agency that works only with treatment centers. So the answer to your question is that, like, still to this day, SoberNation never really had that moment where it's like, okay, this is a business now. I just sort of stumbled my way towards building a really great business out of it. But what it did is it taught me a skill, which I was able to then apply to something, which I turned into like a super successful business.
And it's somehow, and I do the same with this podcast now, it's a marketing channel for you, right? So you build something that has a huge audience, and then this audience is somehow channeling people to your other business. So you're getting treatment centers coming to you because of SoberNation. But my question is, when you're saying this, that treatment centers were coming to you and say, how do you reach these people? Because we also want to reach them too. The first thing that came to my mind is, why don't you just do ads on your blog? And you can just advertise for treatment centers. Did you ever try doing that?
I did. Yeah. The beginning of SoberNation was exactly that. And looking back, so the beautiful thing about SoberNation is I failed over and over and over again on that site to basically learn the lessons. So if I could do it all over again, I probably would have just put ads on the site and just focused on growing it. But I was stuck in my head a little bit at the time because one of the things that Copyblogger teaches is how ridiculously unprofitable ads are. And it's like, it's really disgusting when you think about it. Like if you put Google ads on your website, you make like 0.00001 cent for every like 100 people that come to your site. And so yeah, like looking back, the first 5 years, I probably should have just put ads on it and just like let it ride and not thought about it too much, because I was always experimenting and like, okay, what if I tried doing this? What if I tried doing this? Or what if I put a membership on it? And I sort of was like a little bit herky-jerky when if I would have just put ads on it, it probably would have given me the mental bandwidth to just focus on creating the best content, right? But like ultimately, it still probably worked out for the best because like, yeah, you're exactly right. SoberNation just turned into the best marketing channel that I possibly could have asked for. And, I say this as humbly as possible. I'm not trying to be like a humble brag, but I'm probably have the most expertise in the country, maybe the world, I don't know, definitely the country, on doing digital marketing for behavioral healthcare centers. And
because it's such a niche topic as well, right?
Totally, yes. That's exactly right. And so, like hindsight's 2020, maybe I should have put ads on it, maybe not. But ultimately, like I think the skill that I've developed over the last 10 years is worth like way more than the couple of $1,000 I would have made a year with ads on the website.
Yeah, definitely. I think ads only actually make money once your platform already has a huge traffic. In the beginning, it's really hard to monetize with ads, I reckon. Let's go back to when you were writing your blogs and you realized that people were reading your content. What was the traffic then? How many people were actually reading your posts? Do you still remember how did it go? It was like 1,000 people, 2,000 or 10,000. Do you remember the numbers?
Oh, much more than that, because at the time, it sounds so funny because it makes me sound like I'm old, but the internet was just different then. At the time, Facebook was way more viral than it is now. Like there was this huge controversy where if you had a Facebook page, all of a sudden Facebook made it so the algorithm only showed like 1 to 2% of, if you posted something on a Facebook page, Facebook only showed that content to like 1 to 2% of the people that liked your page. And so, at the time I had 20,000 followers on my Facebook page. And so I would stay up all night and I would write these articles and I would get so pumped up to publish the article in the morning and post it on the Facebook page and then just watch the thing explode. Like all of a sudden there's 10,000 people on my website sharing this article and it's going viral. And then like the very next day, Facebook made the announcement. They're like, hey, that shit is done. And if you want to go viral, you need to pay us. And so like instantly that was just gone. And so now I think it's, I don't even search the analytics as much anymore. I spend a lot more time on the email subscribers. And so like I know we get a significant amount of email subscribers every day. But last time I checked, we probably get like 8,000 to 10,000 hits a day on SoberNation.
Whoa. Okay. It's crazy. It's a lot of people. So you coming from recovering from addiction, right? And now suddenly you have something that somehow, obviously in a different dimension, but can also be very addictive, right? Which is being read and being loved by others and seeing people coming to your website. Did that also somehow became an addiction to you to like post and see people coming and that felt nice? Did it replace somehow the addiction you had before?
Yeah, certainly. But this is a little bit off topic, but really the thing I replaced it with was fitness and exercise, especially running. I've always been into fitness. I've always been into health. My sister is a state champ athlete. I was like a pretty exceptional soccer and lacrosse player. And so it came naturally to me, but like I certainly found my peace through late night runs in Florida. Like,
Mhm.
I guess you have to understand the perspective in my life. You know, like I grew up in Philly, and now through this random event, I'm living in like beautiful South Florida, and like I'm a quarter mile away from the beach. And so I just loved going on runs late at night with my dog, and like going to the tennis courts and just doing push-ups and burpees and like pull-ups on this bar that was over the door, because you know how tennis courts have like gated fences, and so the door itself was like this gated fence that had like a big bar going on top of the header. And so yeah, like I'm not trying to make this a fitness podcast, but I very much replaced my addiction with fitness.
With business.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the reason why I was asking this is because being an entrepreneur can also have, or an influencer in your case, can also have a lot of downsides, right? You become addicted to see if people love you, and then you want to write something, and if it doesn't perform as your previous blog, maybe you get upset. I certainly would get upset, and I've spoken with a lot of YouTubers, especially. They say, yeah, sometimes they just don't go as well, and you get somehow addicted to the algorithm and creating and so on. So that's why I was asking if this happened to you, right? So if you think, okay, I need to create better content, like, was this an issue or not so much?
No, that certainly was an issue, and when you frame it like that, so the word isn't addiction, the word is obsession.
Right.
Because I've just always been, even when I was growing up, like I tell this joke way too much, but it seems to come back over and over again in my life. But my mom always used to say, it's your gift and it's your curse, because I just get wrapped up in stuff. Like,
Right.
I don't know. There's plenty of times where I wish I could be like, hey brain, like shut up. Everything's fine. Like, like just shut up, stop spinning in circles. And then there's other times where I'm like, man, this is a superpower. Like I can outwork anybody. I can out execute anybody. Like nobody can do this for as long and as hard as I can. And so, yeah, like realistically, this quirk or a personality trait or deficit, maybe you could even call it, I'm not sure, has totally worked out in my favor, because I wanted to succeed so bad, and it's all I cared about. You know, like I didn't go out on the weekends anymore. Like I didn't party. I didn't drink. Obviously, like I've been sober for almost 12 years now. All I've done for the last 12 years is work on my brand, work on my company, stay healthy, and like keep a handful of friends. Like
Right.
that is it. Like that is all I've done. And so I don't ever apologize for the fact that like I've done well, because it came at a significant cost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you said that also one of your focus was fitness, and definitely also then your business, which end up being very also good for you. So I'm also now curious about this marketing agency. You built this blog. You got a lot of people coming to it. You got treatment centers coming to you and say, "Hey, Tim, I also want to do that. Like, how do I attract people to my treatment center?" And then you decided, okay, maybe there's a possibility here to make a business. How did that process go? How do you establish this business? Tell me maybe about your first client. Do you still recall who was your first client?
Oh yeah, it was an all women's facility in Fort Lauderdale, and this is like a really great topic, and I've been writing about this a lot, especially in recent years as I've just gotten so much experience. I actually launched a paid newsletter recently called The Bootstrapper. It's thebootstrapper.io.
I found it when I was searching for it on Google, actually. When I searched for Bootstrap, it's one of the first results.
Yeah,
cool.
Very cool. And so here's why I think it's important. And this is going to take a little bit of explaining, but I think I can explain it pretty quickly.
Go for it.
In almost every case, the best business for somebody to start in the very beginning is like a freelance business or a client services business. a lot of language on the internet that makes it seem like selling your time for money is a complete failure. Like, how could you do that? You're selling your time for money. You need leverage. Like, that's the buzzword, right? Leverage.
Yeah,
but
that's what I think as well, actually. I'm curious about what you're going to say now.
Well, because you got to start somewhere. And the good thing about being a freelancer or even eventually working up to an agency is that it's instantly profitable. Like, if you get your first client, you're making money.
Right.
Whereas if you're selling products online or you got a SaaS company, like, there's a lot of investment with both time and money up front. And so you build these products and you don't know if it's going to work. And so the skills that you learn from running like a digital service business are just invaluable. Like, you learn shit that they don't teach you. You learn about invoicing, you learn how to manage disgruntled employees. You learn how to manage disgruntled clients. You learn how to be a leader. Like, and most importantly, really, this is like the top of the list. Most importantly is you learn how to develop systems, because it's the system which is ultimately going to get you out of the way, because the bottleneck for a service agency is always like the owner. It's always the CEO, because he or she is going to want to do everything his or her way. Whereas like the best thing you could actually do is develop a system and then get out of the way so that the work can flow on its own.
Right.
And so my first client was a freelance client, and like everybody else, I had no idea what I was doing. Like, I was stumbling around and I was writing articles, especially location based, for women's drug rehab search in Fort Lauderdale. And it went pretty well. And then I got another client, and then I got another client, and then I hired my first employee, and that was a disaster, and then I hired another employee, and then I got my first small office in Delray Beach, Florida, right above the Starbucks on Federal and Atlantic. And so
why? So just to understand this, so you're mostly focused, I guess, on SEO, right? So that was the main service you're giving to your clients, writing blogs. Mm-hmm. Why did you hire your first employee? Was it because you just had too many customers and you couldn't do it all yourself? Or was already you thinking, okay, I need to automate my business, I need to create a system?
Well, it was both. I read a book called The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber, which I recommend every single entrepreneur read, probably even before you start a business.
Okay.
And it really
we'll link it in the show notes.
Yeah, please do. So, like, here's the example that he uses, where almost every small business starts as a technician because, like, you have a particular skill. And so in the book he uses is a baker. Like, you're a technician, you are selling your skill. Right. But eventually, what are you going to do? Because you can't bake 100 cakes in a day. It's just not possible. Especially because once you're baking 100 cakes for, 5 different employees, or 5 different customers, now you got to figure out how to manage them. You got to figure out how to drive the cakes, right? You got to figure out where you're going to do this because you need more than one oven. And so, like, the technician slowly has to remove his or herself from the role of actually baking cakes, which is very difficult for technicians to do, because, like, I'm a writer, and, like, I know how I want my clients to perceive the work that they get. I know how the written work should be, but you got no choice, because you're either going to burn out or you're going to be overloaded with work that the quality of the work is going to be shit. And so you have to really learn how to develop systems that make it so that anybody can come into the role and, like, replicate the product, really, the service that you want to sell, so that every time you grow, you can, like, create a system and then take another step back and create a system and take another step back, so that ultimately, and here's the real kicker, so that ultimately, like, you as the owner are working on the business instead of in the business. And I believe that once you get to that point, that's when, you want to start building a digital product that has, like, a ton of leverage and a ton of scale, and maybe creating some courses that can productize, like, your specific knowledge that you've learned over the years.
Right. you kind of need to prove first that you can do it, right? Even though there's a lot of people that they create courses and they do all of this without even having ever built a business. I think that's something that you can see even on Twitter that happens, right?
Yeah, and we're opening up a whole can of worms here because it's like difficult to explain the cyclical nature of it, but it's like, I'm going to create a business that sells courses that teaches you how to build a business so that you can build a business by selling courses to teach other people how to build a business by selling courses. And like, not a single business was built the whole time.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And so, like, look, I want everybody to have abundance in their lives, and I'm not even trying to knock anyone. I'm trying to show like the absurdity of it, because in almost every case it fails. Because people aren't stupid, and we want to think that they're stupid because of all the dumb shit that goes on Twitter. But ultimately, like, people know if what they're listening to or what they're reading or what they're buying comes from a place of experience and like expertise. And so you got to be patient, and you got to really like learn those abstract fundamentals before people take you seriously.
Yeah, totally agree. So in the beginning, when you're growing SoberNations, you said that you were not making money. So I guess, did you have some side hustles, some side gigs that you were just doing to sustain yourself?
Yeah, I was selling on the phone, which is like the first and last job I've ever had. And man, I can't tell you how valuable this job was. I sold diabetic supplies, and also I sold catheters, which was really enlightening in my life, because when I talk about this time, people say like, catheters, you mean the things that like people stick into their privates to help them pee? And the answer is yes. And I'll tell you why it was so meaningful to me, because people that need catheters are people with spinal injuries. And people that need diabetic supplies are usually people, at least my clients, like there's many different kinds of people with diabetes, obviously, but the kind of clients that I had were people with type 1 diabetes who like just legitimately needed it. And if you fuck up their order, like, you are really, really, really going to mess up their lives. And so I built amazing relationships with these people that I never even met. Like there's this one kid who broke his back in a dirt bike accident, and he was 24 years old, and he had a girlfriend, and like he taught himself how to drive a car, and he built this contraption to get him in and out of his car through like this sweet little motor that he made. He was really amazing. There was this other guy that every time I talked to him, he was just always so happy, and he always used to make these like relatively dirty but hysterical jokes. And he had a broken back. He got hit by a drunk driver. And so like, I learned through that job that sales isn't about convincing people to do something that they're skeptical about doing. Sales is about finding people that like need the solution that you're offering and creating an alignment between the two. And it also told me how to get hung up on.
You both can win, right? So you
that's
both...
exactly. Yeah, but it also taught me how to get hung up on a lot, and to hear no a lot, and just to not worry about it. Like, it's a hard thing to learn, because people get really uncomfortable with sales, because getting told no sucks. But man, I don't know if there's ever been a job. I don't know if there's ever been an experience in my life, really, other than, just the experience about getting sober that we talked about, that created so much like value for me. And so, yeah, like I know I went down the rabbit hole a little bit, but the whole time I was supporting myself by making like 120 calls a day with people that may have needed the products and services that the company I was working for was selling. So it was amazing.
So when you hired your first employee, though, you were already doing full-time your agency.
Yeah, correct. At that point, I had gone all in.
And from then on, it's been just growing, getting more clients, getting more employees, and working on a business instead of in the business. Is that correct?
That is so correct. Yeah. I mean, geez, we got 15 employees now.
Wow.
We were talking before we recorded. I got employees in Recife, Brazil, and they're not like contractors. They're real employees that are on
Full time.
payroll that are my friends.
Wow.
Same thing in the Philippines. I got 2 workers, Davey and Raymond, who are like my family. They're gonna invite me and my wife to their wedding. They're a couple that both work for my company. Some people in London, people all over the country, and it's like it's so freaking fulfilling because there are times where I'm thinking to myself, I have Copy Blogger, I have a huge audience of people. Like, why do I stop doing this sales agency game? And
you can sell it, right? You can just sell the company.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, those are definitely thoughts that go through my head, but I just can't help it. Like, I wake up in the morning and I'm so excited to get to work with my team. And I love closing deals so much. And the rush I get from signing contracts is still like anything else for me personally. So we're going to keep doing it, at least for a little while longer, and we'll see where it takes us.
How does it feel to be able to help so many people with SoberNation?
It feels really good, man. I think a lot. There was a guy named Ken who was a counselor in the rehab that I went to. And so in rehab, sometimes, like, you got to understand, when you're in rehab, you're with people that are addicts, and a lot of them are like pretty manipulative. And like, I'm not trying to stereotype people too much, but I think it's safe to say that drug addicts like steal sometimes and like maybe get in trouble with the law. So there's a lot of manipulation there. And I remember there was a conversation where one of the clients that I was with was basically yelling at Ken, saying like, this isn't helping me at all. Why am I even here? This is stupid. Like, you guys are just in it for the money. And I remember Ken saying to him, he's like, look, you're looking at this all wrong. This is a win-win for everybody. Like, I went to school for 12 years to do what I do and to come here to help you. The business itself needs to make money so that we can run, so that we can afford the vans that we drive you around in, so that we can afford the food that you eat. I have the privilege of doing this to help you. And people do walk out of this rehab better and get their lives together. He was like, so did you ever notice if there's like an oil exec or something and they make a ton of money, everyone's like, oh, that's a really smart businessman. But if you're in the business of like helping people, there's a weird stigma, I guess, around getting paid to do it. And I remember Ken said, like, no, this is the way it's supposed to be. Like, I am providing for myself by helping you. And so you're getting helped, I'm getting helped, and people get jobs and create like prosperity for everybody. And that really changed the way I think about it, because now it's like I have the privilege of doing what I love to do, which provides a life for me, which supports other people. And I think that's just really best case scenario, where like everybody wins in that case, as opposed to some, like greedy oil exec who's just looking to exploit people. So it feels like really, really great that the work that I do provides for me and my family while also providing for other people. Like I really just feel strongly about that.
Yeah, that's also the lifestyle I want to achieve. And I think that's the beauty of being an entrepreneur, is to be able to solve a problem that you care about and have the privilege to work on it for the rest of your life, because it's able to sustain you and your family and also give you the life you want, right? So I think that's kind of why I want to be an entrepreneur, and this possibility of making your life purpose to change the world for a better place. So I totally agree with you. And especially also in the internet, also people assume a lot that things should be free because, well, we were used that the internet was free.
Yeah, I don't even know why.
Yeah, but now I think it's also a little bit changing, and people realize that it's okay to pay for products that you love. And most of the times, when you don't pay for the products, it's it's because you are the product, right? And then you have the problems with Cambridge Analytica, and you have Facebook and this kind of shit with the ad.
That's exactly right, man.
Yeah.
That is exactly right. I've said that exact line. I don't even know how many times in my life.
Yeah.
Like, if it's free, you're the product.
Yeah. One thing that I really liked about this story, and we are now reaching the end of our chat, but it was really inspiring, is also the fact on how you see things always in a positive way, right? So a lot of people would maybe think about their problem with addiction and always kind of consider themselves or pity themselves, right? They would think, oh, I had this problem and now I cannot be better, or I cannot reach my dreams. But you have a different perspective. You look at your job as well as a salesman and say, I've learned a lot from this. I take the positive from this. I take the positive from my rehab experience. I take the positive of life. Do you think this is something that is also important to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah, for sure. You have to have, I don't want to call it delusion, because you have to have a sense of realism, but for me, it's like, what other choice do you have? Because the opposite sounds really terrible. Like, if I got upset about every single thing that didn't go my way when trying to build my business, like, I would always be upset. And I'm not saying that to be dramatic. Like, more things go wrong than go right, significantly. Like, for every one thing that goes right, 20 things go wrong.
Yeah.
It's nothing but continuously putting out fires and solving problems. And so for me, it's almost just a sense of like pragmatism. Like, what other choice do I possibly have? The only other choice is to get upset about every single thing that could possibly upset me. And like, if that's what I wanted to do, then like, I would be upset all the time. So I don't know, maybe I'm an optimistic person. I think that a lot of what I've learned through my journey has given me like a positive perspective. And I think I have a lot of gratitude, which helps. But really, when these conversations come up, I think the best advice I could give is just much more practical. It's not about like some woo-woo feeling good, have a positive outlook on shit. It's much more along the lines of like, it's really dumb to not, because that's very inefficient.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So what's the point, you know?
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think that's great line to end this episode. Tim, thank you so much for sharing a bit of your journey here with the wannabe entrepreneurs. I think it's really inspiring. Definitely inspired me, and I think it will also inspire a lot of the listeners. And yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. And hey, I hope it inspired people too. And also, I want to commend you. I know that this is a new journey for you, but you're like a really great conversationalist. I really love talking to you. So I hope you keep doing this for years to come.
Thank you so much. I really love doing this, so I hope so as well.
That's great.
And I will link your Twitter profile. I will link SoberNation, your marketing agency, basically everything we talked about in the show notes. I will also ask you for the name of that book. Maybe you can write it to me afterwards so that I can link. And Seth Godin, everything, all these resources, I'll link them in the show notes.
Be happy to. Excellent. Yeah. Follow me on Twitter. I'm trying to get Twitter famous so that I don't have to work anymore.
Yes, definitely. We'll also link your Twitter. I'm already following, by the way. And yeah, now for the listeners, I hope you enjoy this interview. If you like to learn more about other journeys from other entrepreneurs, you can just go to wannabe-entrepreneur.com and listen there. This was another Wannabe Entrepreneur. See you next time.